And we're live. All right. Welcome to the Pocketnow Weekly. This week, LG appoints a new president for their mobile division. Andy Rubin steps down from his position at Essential. And does Samsung have the balls to make a graphene battery? I have to give Jules props for that. That was a pretty good, was a triple entendre. We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 281 of the Pocketnow Weekly, recorded December 1st at noon Pacific. This weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile: smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong out on the East Coast. How's it going, buddy boy?
I mean, graphene battery is there a very complicated issue, so that triple entendre will be explained. We'll do so in short time. Very
excellent.
Be here today.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about battery technology since like the earliest days of cell phones, and so this could be a potentially exciting development. You know, you read stories on Reddit about improvements to batteries, and then it's always like, and then maybe this could come to consumers 20 years in the future. We're finally, it sounds like,
I mean, we're already at that stage because we've been talking about graphene for decades and decades.
So that's that'll be a nice transition from the, you know, like the future tech kinds of stories that we talk about. You know,
and it's only then that we start talking about flying cars. So I mean, it's just this barrier, and then boom, we're on our way.
I'm still hardcore against flying cars until humanity is no longer navigating or piloting their vehicles. I'm serious. I look at Back to the Future 2, and I think, what a hellscape. You know, one of those things falls out of the sky and could kill so many people. I do not want the responsibility of piloting an aerial vehicle. I want that to be.
I learned that I was bad at Tron, and that has a lot of navigational elements to that. I just kept crashing into walls and the lines. So yeah.
See, I was a big fan of the Tron, you know, especially playing like old school Snake. I liked my little Lightspeed racer battle plan. But that's not what this podcast is about this week. We've got a pretty heavy news week this show. We've got a lot to talk about just in terms of the happenings surrounding the mobile industry. We'll definitely be fielding your questions during the broadcast, and we'll be saving your emails for our end of the month viewer mailbag. But definitely keep sending those in, because we've already got a couple that I've highlighted and flagged. Some stuff I want to talk about when we get to the end of December, especially because that'll be an end of the year show. We'll definitely want your feedback and your input there. And Jules, how might someone get in contact with us if they want to join the conversation?
Simple and straightforward. You go onto Twitter and you put the hashtag PN Weekly into whatever you want to comment about, and we'll be able to see it and respond to it live during the show. So hashtag PN Weekly on Twitter, and we'll just talk to you like that.
Sounds good. All right, Jules, let's jump right into this news block. Do you want to just run down the headlines, and then we can go back and talk about the stories, just see what we're
this week. So for the week of November 25th, 2017, this is all the news that is fit the podcast. LG has a new president for its chronically money-losing mobile division. Juno Cho is moving within the company, while Kwang Jung Hwan, a relative unknown, takes over. We do know that he was involved in R&D for one of the Chable's first smartphones back in 2009, but that's really about it. Even with acclaimed flagship phones and a breadth of mid-rangers, the company has had financial challenges for poor sales performance for the past. In the tidal wave of sexual harassment claims in the United States, Essential Products founder Andy Rubin has taken leave from the company following a report from the information that found his former employer, Google, had internally investigated him for an inappropriate work relationship. The co-creator of Android apparently left shortly had finished. Apple and Qualcomm are entangled in patent lawsuits on not just modems, but also battery management. Qualcomm is looking for a sales injunction on iPhones over these patents, while it's rumored that Apple is looking to design and manufacture its own power controller chip. The chip could displace one small supplier in favor of its choice chipset provider, TSMC, with installations on iPhones, iPads, and Apple Watches starting by 2019. With Apple, Black Friday weekend sales for the iPhone X were really healthy. Rosenblatt Securities estimates that of the 15 million iPhones sold in those days, 6 million have been shipped, costing $999 or more. All of this going towards a total goal of at least 80 million units shipped this holiday season. Verizon is itching to launch 5G service next year, but not for your phones. Fixed internet service, aka home broadband, will be coming to at least 3 markets in 2018, perhaps up to 5, all to see if wireless will provide the same quality connection as wireline. The big cellular industry associations have yet to finalize 5G specifications. Snapchat is relaunching its interface in the next few days. It will move stories from friends over to the left side swipe from the main camera panel, where direct messages can already be accessed. On the right side remains content from big publishers. CEO Evan Spiegel says this is an attempt to truly separate the social from the media. Algorithms will also be implemented to sort up and content to the tops of those pages. Motorola started publicly testing Android Nougat on the Moto X Pure Edition in late March. It announced that the update was official in late September, and it was up until late last month that the majority of users have finally seen the update moved onto their device and installed. Apparently, Sprint users got first dibs over the past couple of months, while the last couple of weeks saw Verizon and the GSM networks get into the update. Samsung is in conjunction with Seoul National University has reached into a research paper into how it was able to stabilize the highly capable but somewhat fragile material graphene into ball forms for use in batteries. Compared with lithium-ion technology, a full charge can be done in a fifth of the time and with 45% more capacity for the space. Filed for in South Korea and in the United States. And finally, 1 year on, Jony Ive is just not loving the design for that iPhone 7 he made. It sold millions and millions of units, just like many other iPhones before, and yet he called its design disconnected when comparing it to the iPhone 10. Apple's chief design officer made that remark while being interviewed by Smithsonian Magazine for having been given its American Ingenuity Award. So, let's take things back to the top and talk about how LG has continued to fail over the years. I understand that you had a little rant going on your channel too. Give the digest of what.
Oh yeah, so
That's about.
I've where things are not like sort of appropriate for the kind of polished presentation that we put up on Pocketnow. I've been doing some just like little vlogs. Like I've been doing travel vlogs and things on my own personal channel, youtube.com/womback now. But this last week, I really wanted to see if I could take a look at every major manufacturer that we reviewed and see if I could pinpoint what I thought their biggest mistake of the year was. And so I've already got videos up on Samsung, Motorola, LG. I'm going to put up Google's this evening, the day that this podcast is streaming live. And LG, it's been a consistent issue with LG's mobile division over the last couple of years that they've started putting on some really interesting pressure with their V series phones. I think they've finally figured out what they want to do with the G series moving forward. But it doesn't matter if the company is starting to execute on producing better products if they're not advertising those products, if they're not really trying to get boots on the ground to interact with consumers. And so hearing this move, this management decision, scrapping the person who's currently in charge of the mobile division and bringing in some fresh new blood, as you mentioned in the rundown, he's a relative unknown in this ecosystem. I have higher hopes that maybe this individual will try to work towards doing something a bit more subversive or a bit more disruptive to the way that LG has been doing business in the past.
So we've seen a sort of split in the strategy with the flagship G and V series coming along, and the V has been always that video, that multimedia crazy kind of thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's hit record from doing all those crowdsourced, and you have not always been a fan of those. Whereas the G series has been more whimsical, has been more of an all-around sort of image that has not been well understood. I mean, the one that I
really well received.
Yeah, what was the one with the clones of whoever the heck was it? Daniel Day-Lewis or something?
No, is Jason Statham. Yeah,
Jason
he's like
Statham.
dressed in drag, riding on the back of a motorcycle that he is also driving. I like, so
That was the
when we
hipster
look
troll
at
car wash
that was the
of
hipster. That was the
LG's
hipster
market.
troll car wash shark leaping for LG. Also, no. When we look at what they're trying to accomplish in their messaging, I'm having a really hard time trying to nail down who is it that they're trying to appeal to. What emotional triggers are they trying to employ? And what does this say about the tone of their company and the tone of the products that they produce? And when I pick up an LG V series, I don't think lighthearted, whimsical, fun millennial phone. I think durable, rugged productivity and content creation. You know, so you can overlap with some YouTubers and do some fun stuff there too. But where's that commercial that just showcases or highlights that not only does LG have 3.5 millimeter headphone jack still in their phone, built into their phone, but that it is by far the highest quality piece of audio equipment that any manufacturer has turned out for a mobile device. You know, that is a talking point that's worth mentioning, and yet we have near radio silence when it comes to their messaging and their marketing. And you combine that with sort of an awkward launch for both the V20 and the V30, announcing a product and then it taking weeks before you can get pricing and availability for different regions around the world. Absolutely sucks all the momentum, all of the wind out of the sails. And it's a really difficult way to try and have a conversation with potential consumers when this industry iterates really quickly. Every major manufacturer has beginning of year and end of year announcements to make, hardware deliveries, and LG consistently feels like they're always playing catch up when they're often one of the first to make an announcement. You know, the
Yeah.
G6 arriving before the Galaxy S8, the V30 being announced before the end of most of the end of the year competition, and we still really didn't have proper final retail grade hardware in our hands until we were already well into reviewing other devices. It's not a good look for a company that, with some serious missteps, and we can always point to the G4 and V10 era of boot looping devices. I had terrible experiences with the G5, but on the whole, this is a company that can turn out some great products. That doesn't matter if consumers don't know they exist.
No, it doesn't. So hopefully this, I don't know, this, I guess, the protege of LG's smartphone legacy could hopefully turn that around. In the meantime, one of the prodigies of our smartphone ecosystem to this day.
Oh, actually, before you move on, I'm sorry, Jules. I just pulled our Twitter feedback up. We are getting some chatter using the PN Weekly hashtag. I do just want to throw this one in from Andrew Wallace, friend of the show. He was a guest a couple weeks back to help us talk about some mobile news. I'm going to throw this one to you, Jules. Do you think Andrew Wallace writes at hashtag PN Weekly? Do you feel that LG needs to make changes to the hardware side in addition to the advertising side? What do you think about the quality of product that LG is putting out? As compared to my rant about how they advertise their product.
Well, I mean, we're already seeing a lot of convergence between the big brands, Apple, LG, Samsung, in their design language for their products. It's a shame that the V series had to go along with that, but I guess I understand why. The compact form, as well as just holding the device itself, is kind of one of the big triggers at a smartphone at a carrier. But in terms of just hardware design and making sure that every base is covered, I would like to see more models, not necessarily of the like a wide range of specs, but just different upper level tiers. Like we want to see more use of that Snapdragon 630 or 660 or whatever that is.
That's a good call.
Just so that we have a little bit more not modularity, but a different look. I want to see more looks and with comparable performance with something that can just.
No, I agree. Some kind of I think a well-structured diversity of their lineup would definitely be appreciated, because I think LG carries a reputation for making two flagships and then a whole, in the United States, obviously this is going to be a little bit different in Europe, where I think they're, what is it, the X Power and the different lineups there. I think they've got a little bit more saturation over when you cross the Atlantic. But here in the United States, it's like LG carries that reputation for $200 phones and $600+ phones that then very quickly drop in price. So I would definitely love to see LG make a targeted and considered mid-range option. I would love to see them take the Venture, their clone of a Galaxy Active, a rugged phone, and put a 630 or a 660 in that device and really make sure that that is a proper $400 to $500 option. And then they can focus on not diluting the G series, making the G series a premier flagship, not like sort of a beginning of year follow up from the end of last year kind of device, kind of like what we got with the G6 this year. That I would definitely love to see. I think in terms of design and style, though, I'm not too concerned about where LG's at right now. I think they've arrived at a design language that makes sense for them. I think their next biggest challenge is really going to be whether or not they can get after their QA gremlins. Again, consistency becomes a big issue. And while their phones aren't boot looping, if you're going to work in OLED against Samsung, you need to have a really high quality and consistent display being delivered to consumers.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, LG has its problems to sort out. We'll let them be. Hopefully, we'll see what happens in 2018 if that kind of ring can really be effective by then. But moving on to another pioneer, as I said, of our smartphone ecosystem, but has come upon what we can consider, well, just this upsurge in sexual harassment attention towards these cases and towards the victims of them, towards the survivors. And it's here that we find that Andy Rubin has been caught up in all this and has to, basically he's been serving as the distraction for what his firm has been doing with essential products and idea of this ecosystem where everything just works out, where multiple services come together as one. And he's always been the figurehead of this company. We cannot stress enough that this guy is the person who founded one of the most influential smartphone platform to the state. But like, what do you think? Like, does it help us or hurt us in the first place to even continue to invoke his name throughout all this stuff? And like, because
no, I mean, the thing is, he's never going to be completely excised from the conversation. He's Andy Rubin, and he has, I mean, if we could dedicate an entire podcast to all of the things that Andy Rubin has helped create and helped sort of birth, in addition to Android. His footprint on the mobile computing landscape is pretty large. It's a disappointing aspect of where we're at right now, where so many public figures are being called out for potential abuse or potential misdeeds. But this is something that I think needs to happen culturally, where an individual's ability to raise their voice and speak in opposition to a powerful figure and to speak in opposition to abuse is a really new concept. And so we're just now, as a society, figuring out how we want or how we should be coping with allegations of abuse, investigating what might have transpired between someone in a position of power against an underling. And it's gonna be rough for a while. These kinds of cultural evolutionary moments shouldn't happen quickly. But right now, the novelty of having a platform and having the ability to broadcast a message and not, be vetted by a TV news network or some sort of political organization or a major corporation is so fresh that this conversation is happening publicly faster than we can cope with how we should be, what like proper justice should look like. So, Andy Rubin is getting caught up in that. And I'm disappointed, but this is something that needs to happen, not just in terms of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, or, a forced abuse, rape, anything like that, but also just so much of our our business, so much of our politics is built on systemic abuse. You know, working employees in difficult conditions for low pay. In the entertainment industry where I come from, I used to work at a talent agency. You know, I was technically paid under minimum wage because they had a loophole that they could exploit because of all the overtime I was going to be working, while angry agents would like throw staplers at walls and stuff like that when a deal didn't go their way. You would think that someone who was born out of that mailroom mentality, when they're finally in a position of power, they would think, you know what, I don't need to continue this cycle of abuse. But instead, the agents who actually make it through that process tend to be even harder on the people coming up than their situation was when they were coming up. So this whole culture, this whole conversation, and I think most people in their respective industries can point to aspects of their career which, the hazing process or the abuse process or the like suck it up and you just got to deal with it process of getting to a decent respectable management or mid-level tier position, someplace where you have a little agency over your own life. I think most people could point to aspects of their job that they don't appreciate or they don't like, and which frankly are not necessary to do good business in the 21st century. I hope that this conversation can expand into those realms as well. Not only do we have a severe, clear and present issue with misconduct, sexual misconduct, and sexual abuse, but hopefully that can spread to all other areas where we could make this a lot nicer for everybody. We could make this a lot easier for everybody. And unfortunately, if that means having to tear down a few of our idols, then I think that's worth the cost to get to a place where we're not doing business like this. We shouldn't be doing business like this, and we can do better.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agreed there. I personally don't have anything to add since I've never really been part of a traditional workplace type of situation. But I mean, I know that I've stood up for a couple of people. I'm not going to say who.
It's
Who
not
have
your
been,
job to tell their story for them.
yeah, no, they got harassed, and it's I think everyone has a role to play in terms of just doing it and taking their own initiative wherever they happen to be, whether it be a workplace or something else. But not going to stray too far into that. We do have more news to move on to.
Let's jump on to the next story. And I'm sure, folks watching, if you have thoughts on this, definitely drop us a tweet, drop us a comment. It's a sticky situation, and it's something that I think a lot of people are going to be emotional about, but it's one of those.
It's certainly one of those appreciated conversations that has been. It's well past time to have. So
definitely.
Yeah. Let's talk about Apple and Qualcomm. The brew continues to go ha ha. I don't know where that came from, but power management chips is just one of the chips that Qualcomm has in terms of wanting to get a sales ban, imports injunction against Apple, and it doesn't seem like Carras is gonna close up anytime soon.
No, it's probably not. In fact, it'll probably grow wider.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does this? We're now moving into a period where Apple is trying to get more and more of its components under its own design. We saw that with graphics, with Imagination Technologies having to take a big fall, having moved away from its supplier, and now we're seeing a centralized control in TSMC because they make their Apple A processors, and now they're going to make a power controller chip that's going to go on all three major form factors for Apple's mobile products. So that's,
and this is also with, we know Apple's trying to make the move of using Intel for radio management for their modems. I mean, this is an escalating arms race between these two ginormous players. Real quick, just as a tangent to this, did I make up reading a story that the Qualcomm Broadcom acquisition was going to fall through, or that was being pulled off the table, or did I did I imagine that?
No, Qualcomm rejected Broadcom's bid.
Okay, so
A couple weeks
that
ago.
actually works in Apple's favor, IMO, where Apple can still rely on Broadcom controllers in their phones, and they don't have to worry about increased leverage from Qualcomm.
Broadcom really wants Qualcomm very badly, and there's a investor battle going on to see how much
If they can
more
pull that off.
how much more of an offer Broadcom is willing to make. Broadcom is known to bargain hard, so
Yeah.
but it's
We're
like
talking
there's
$100 billion market cap, I would imagine so.
yeah, and Qualcomm has just not been performing at all, really. It's been very stale, and it's topped out at what, like maybe just over $80 a share at some
Yeah.
point in the past decade. So, for them, investors want that $80 per share as a premium, and it'll be interesting to see. But it sounds like if both sides keep on insisting on this, then one player going ahead with all the silicon in their hands, which is
Yeah. But
which is
I mean, to getting back to the story and getting back to Apple, this is one of those situations where, again, Apple has the clout and Apple has the resources to actually take a couple hits. It can weather negative stories about Intel radios for 2 or 3 generations of phone with almost no perceptible impact on sales, as they're sorting out how it is that they're going to go about making this transition. And so if any company can sort of separate themselves from the Qualcomm ecosystem in a meaningful fashion and find alternatives for the products and services that Qualcomm can provide, I mean, it's literally only Apple at this point that I think could do that. And so what we're seeing here is, I think, the smartest play Apple has, while they're going through these escalating lawsuits about who's using what IP and who's not licensing what products properly. This is probably Apple's smartest play. I don't know that I'm really invested in one side or the other. I feel like kind of a shakeup in the market needs to happen regardless of what these giant players, of who these giant players might be. But we know Qualcomm definitely exerts a significant amount of leverage based on their current market position, and we know Apple engages in business practices which aren't always the nicest because of their market position. And if two companies are going to do battle, I mean, they're well joined. These two companies are about the best that you could point to for doing this kind of legal battle.
I mean, they have all the big guns. They might as well just throw it around, and whoever gets left out in the crossfire is they're toast. I mean, dialogue.
I can't imagine the legal billable hours. I mean, it's one of those is like, I should have been a tech lawyer. I just can't imagine the just insane amount of money that's being dumped into courtroom appearances and negotiating rooms, and that's insane.
So I mean,
Yeah.
there you go. Moving on from that, talking about that iPhone 10 and those 6 million sales that are going towards the 80 million goal. It's apparently hoped that we're going to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million iPhone 10 sales throughout the quarter. So that Black Friday boost was definitely needed in terms of that. But I was wondering how we're going to make the rest of it up with the iPhone the case, because we're still seeing depressed demand for iPhone 8, iPhone 8 Plus. Just not the new shiny thing that apparently Joni Ive wants us to levitate towards. So what do you think?
So the iPhone 8 launch was necessary in that it delivered us an iPhone 7S grade device, and it fit a potential hole in Apple's lineup while they were getting their manufacturing and their distribution in place for the iPhone 10. But I can also appreciate, again, I'm not the biggest fan of iOS devices. I'm still recommending the iPhone SE to people because I love this phone. This is my favorite iPhone. I want this exact same form factor with iPhone 8 specs inside of it. Just give me another SE refresh.
I mean,
This is
Next year, that might be the case.
I'm hoping. Yeah, there have been rumors that we'll finally see a follow up to the SE, and I don't want them to change a damn thing about the form factor. Sorry. When when we're looking at the iPhone 8, I can totally understand why a number of consumers are stuck in a holding pattern when it comes to Apple. If you're, I was on set for Newegg Now, and the director of photography, our DP, was using an iPhone 5, not an iPhone 5S. He is still happy with what he needs to get done with that phone. And he was saying, I was looking at an iPhone 8. I don't think I really want that. I'm just going to wait and see if they make a smaller version of the iPhone 10. I think a lot of people are kind of stuck in this holding pattern right now where they do want something fresh, and the iPhone 8 doesn't feel fresh. It's a very good phone, but it doesn't feel new like the iPhone 10, but they don't want to spend $1,000 on a phone. So let's wait and see a little bit longer. Let's see if I can hold on to my iPhone 5s, my iPhone 6s for another year, see if I can keep them running. And that's a difficult place for Apple to be. We've said this in years past. Apple's greatest success was making tech an emotional lifestyle purchase. But if you can't if you can't warm up those emotions, if you can't get people lit up, if you can't get them excited, it can work just as hard against you as they've been successful with this strategy in years past.
I mean, we're talking about anywhere from 40 to 50 at best million for the new models. So if we're assuming that they get to their goal, 30 million iPhone 7s. It's not just about warming emotions up, it's microwaving them after they've been in the fridge for a while. Like, isn't that kind of antithetical to what Apple wants to do?
Yeah, antithetical. Yeah, okay. Yes and no. It's just antithetical is a strong word, but you're not wrong. We're talking about like nuking emotions again, like really trying to get them hot and passionate, which I'm sure shareholders have an expectation that Apple can do that. But as a tech pundit myself personally, I don't think any company, even Apple, in this current climate can make one move which will get people as excited as they've been in years past. Think about the iPhone 4 era. Think about that change from the iPhone 3 and the polished pebble plastic back to the iPhone 4 and its metal and glass aesthetic, and just how exciting that was as a move for one smartphone manufacturer to make. And that was another, you were just getting off of the iPhone 3 era. So you had all those people on 2-year contracts flipping over to the iPhone 4. It was just amazing synergy in the market. And that was such a huge move for Apple. You can't do that now. And you can't do that now when you also have 5 different models of iPhone that people can currently buy. I think you've confused your own market. I think you've diluted it. And now we're waiting to see if they can get back to the kind of focus that I think consumers turn to Apple for. They don't turn to Apple for myriad numbers of iterative choice. They turn to Apple because they want the best. So just tell me what the best is and I'll buy that and I'll be happy. But they also don't want to spend $1,000. So they're stuck. They're properly stuck right now.
For every iPhone 7 that they sell that is not an iPhone 8, that's $100. iPhone 6S, another $100. iPhone SE, $200 something dollars. And that's all in the gap for them. They don't have any new MacBooks that might, they have the mid-year updates that may or may not get Black Friday or the holiday season discounts. So we're left in a position that it's only the Apple Watch that is driving sales at what?
Well, and services are still showing growth, but Apple doesn't leverage their services as well as Google does. Yeah. Apple Music, that's making money and it's finding an increasing user base. But that's not going to make up the difference on what, the $400 worth of margin on an iPhone 10. Like, you're not going to make that up with hundreds of people every week flipping over to Apple Music. It's more than hundreds. You know what I mean, though. The economy of scale is huge, but like a subscription music service right now is not going to make up the difference on the amazing margins that Apple builds into their products. If those products aren't selling, that's a dangerous place for Apple to be. And right now, if a person can go and buy an iPhone 7 because they feel it's kind of like a consolation prize, but they didn't want to spend a ton of money, and then they get the phone and they like it, that's bad for Apple, because emotionally now that person's going to weigh the rational, practical benefits of a $600 phone, and that they're having a perfectly fine experience using that $600 phone against what they could have spent to get the iPhone 10. And did they really need it? No. The more you start rationally considering your purchases, the worse a position you are, the worse a position Apple is with their current fan base.
Yeah. Let's scroll over to Verizon, which is still trying to get its 5G terminology up. And it's starting out with home internet service, as they don't see a vision for mobile for at least the next couple of years. So this is the next best thing. I'm not sure where else wireless. I should have looked this up, but wireless fixed internet. AT&T, I know, does some sort of rural.
Sprint was doing something too. I don't think they are anymore, but they were using WiMAX for a while.
Yeah, WiMAX for clear wire or something like that.
That's what it was. That's right. And I don't think that's really a viable solution anymore. But yeah, this millimeter wave.
5G
sorry, go ahead.
Doesn't make a difference.
Oh no,
no, I'm just saying doesn't speeds that you're supposed to get. I mean, we're talking about gigabit. That's Qualcomm's kind of big sell.
It definitely does, but again, it's like, I've got this. You can go out and buy an amazing, like $400 business grade gigabit router, and then plug it into a 10 megabit connection. It's not like, that's not really going to give you what you. So having some sort of proto 5G tower in place is definitely something Verizon should be looking at doing. They got so far ahead of the competition on LTE by, again, investing in what would become the LTE standard. They called the market right. Their timing was perfect, and they got so far ahead of their competition that they catapulted themselves to the number one cell carrier position. So it's vital that for Verizon to maintain their sort of market dominance, that they do the same thing with 5G. But if you're talking about home use, this is the big disappointment, that Verizon didn't continue to try and roll out Fios. So you can go to these rural markets and say, hey, we're going to hook you up with this like 5G wireless millimeter wave spectrum point-to-point connection. I've actually heard really good things about utilization of similar technologies. There was a Reddit post a couple weeks ago where someone was basically just buying all of this equipment to outfit this town of like 30 people with broadband internet. And it sounded like it was going to be a wonderfully easy solution to patch them directly into some node that they could get online. They just had no internet service before this guy went out and bought all this equipment himself to install it.
Do it yourself, man.
Yeah, no kidding. So Verizon, I think it's the right play, but if you don't have the backhaul, if you don't have the servers, if you're not actually lighting up dark fiber to fulfill the bandwidth here, then what's the benefit? You've slapped a fast router on a mediocre connection, and you're going to charge more because that 5G rollout is expensive, supposedly. And consumers are going to get it because they don't have any other options, but you didn't really make anything better. You're just charging more for kind of the same mediocre service that those customers probably had access to already.
So does this, if this proves successful at all, does this give an excuse to roll back on public fiber and just maybe do some more diddling around in the background?
It's unfortunately just one of those situations where people who haven't had access to respectably fast broadband internet, I don't think fully understand what the benefits of that bandwidth would be. For those who are trying to fight for in their local communities, I think this will become another again, we'll probably see this escalate even more into 2018 as numerous states are re-examining the laws they have on the books for how competition is supposed to happen. And it's not necessarily even community funded broadband initiatives, but just getting around some of the legislation that makes it really easy for consolidation or for monopolistic business practices to take hold over a community. That I think will probably become another part of this discussion once we're through the net neutrality shenanigans happening in 2 weeks. Is if there's no choice or if there's no option, then there's no incentive to improve connection, and businesses will write off. Verizon will write off whole communities, whole rural areas, because it's just not profitable enough to go in and give them internet access. And it's the sort of hole in being a capitalist. Like, those people matter. And those people also need to be competitive in the 21st century, even if they're farmers or if they're, auto manufacturers or plant workers or what have you. If they don't have access to those services, they are a generation behind when it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to small business. That's going to be crucial to the conversation moving forward. I think Verizon's solution here could be one potential talking point to help elevate the discussion, but I think that'll also go hand in hand with exactly what you were talking about. Just state and local initiatives need to lead the way here.
I'm not sure if cost scales would just go through the roof if not for partnerships, because maybe that could also be another part of it, because AT&T and Verizon are now co-leasing towers for new areas as well. So maybe we'll see more of that in the future. Sprint, T-Mobile, maybe even that could happen in some way.
It would only behoove the companies to work together, but I fear they will work together at significant savings for their own rollout. But then the branding and the marketing on 5Gs is going to allow them to charge excessively more than what they really need to do to not only recoup but make a profit. I mean, that's the danger that we're in right now, is we're in a very mega corporation friendly environment where these kinds of business moves can border on predatory, and they're sort of sanctioned by the regulatory agencies that we currently have in place. That I'm very concerned about. I don't want 5G to roll out to rural areas if it's going to be twice as much as a cable connection, which could offer similar or even better connectivity.
Yeah. Well, connecting all of that towards the internet, and one of the services that you is social media, and we turn over to Snapchat. What do you think about just the idea? Because it's not just the machinations of what is left and what is right, but also just the idea of just separating of social content versus publishers' content, because Facebook has trouble doing that.
So all of Snapchat's moves right now, I think, are too little, too late. I think
for the sake of the company, sure.
Well, and in general, like for the sake of their user base, for the sake of their shareholders, for the sake of the company, I think we're looking at a company that is currently on life support thanks to the momentum of the more passionate users that are sticking with this platform. But I don't think I've seen anything from Snap that makes me think that they can not only turn this ship, that they can sustain, that they won't hemorrhage users and hemorrhage data and hemorrhage coolness, but that they can actually turn the ship around in a meaningful fashion over the next fiscal year.
Well, do you think that this is establishing a sense of trust where there has not been before, and with all the fake news discussion that's been going out, and what Facebook and Instagram are trying to do to go, attack that directly? I feel like this could be more of a counter, like just a complete
there's certainly potential. I don't disagree with you there, but what I mean is, in terms of practical application, real change, so they get out there and they make this big news. They make a big story out of, oh, well, we're finally going to start working on a legit from the ground up Android app. And the reaction to that story from the more tech enthusiastic people, like it's a forehead slap and an eye roll. Like, it's taken you long enough, and a lot of us never adopted your platform because the Android experience was terrible, and we found other solutions for engaging in very similar styles of conversation. And when they opted not to get bought out, was it the Facebook offered them, I forget how much money to buy them out. Well, we're not surprised that basically every other competing platform now offers a similar set of services. Even YouTube is rolling out a stories style interaction for social media and content creators to engage with. Nothing they can do in the next year can't be appropriated, copied, and rolled out on a competing platform even faster than what Snap can actually accomplish. I'm really upset that they haven't doubled down on a hardware strategy, a branded or a lifestyle accessory strategy, because specs were a great first idea that if they had iterated on, I think they could be finding more success in building out the Snap lifestyle brand. But what I see is just missed opportunity after missed opportunity, and now they're in a position where they're trying to play catch up on the very services that they helped to popularize, and that's not a good look.
$3 billion back in 2013 was the offer from Facebook.
Take the money. Okay, sorry. We have a couple comments here. Just real quick, rolling back to our last story. Jules, just real quick on this one, like first phone that comes to the top of your head. This is from Andrew Blackney, A Blackney on Twitter. Hashtag PN Weekly. Which phone will be the first 5G phone?
Honestly, I don't have the faintest, because first of all,
just pick a phone. What phone do you think it's going to be? First phone.
Well, it's the chipset. It's the chipset that makes that happen, and until they incorporate that,
who's going to be the first phone to not only use the chipset, but then also actually pay for all the licensing to properly activate that? Because I mean, I'm sure Qualcomm will put out a chipset that is 5G capable, but if a company doesn't pay for the licensing to use that 5G part of the product, then they won't. So who do you think is going to be the first to actually take the dive?
If we're looking at a typical calendar year, maybe Samsung. But if Qualcomm kind of sticks its head in the sand for a little bit because of some issues, maybe not OnePlus, not LG. Who else? HTC maybe, if they're still around.
I'm willing to bet good money it'll be Samsung eating up a majority of the early chipsets of 2019.
Because they always do.
Qualcomm will launch on that, and I bet it's a Galaxy S10, which is probably going to be the first truly certified, real world, consumer accessible in the United States. This could also move way faster in Asian markets, but I'm willing to bet it'll be a Galaxy S10.
They're already up to 4.5G, whatever that means, or if AT&T has its way, 5G evolution. So.
And getting back to Snap from at Renato Laporte, for a while, young people used Snap for pics and text. For text, they got back to WhatsApp. For pics, they got all the cool Snap features on Instagram. I just don't see, like, in their current incarnation, in their current iteration, what Snap can offer that their competitors can't just immediately copy and keep their user base tied up.
I don't see it either. I mean, I occasionally use Snapchat, but I've been finding Instagram stories being a more compelling experience for me, just being able to see the static photos as well as the curated stories of how after days and whatnot. So
agreed.
Let's move on to Motorola. I think there's a question here that I want to get to answering, but yeah, so Moto X Pure Edition finally getting that Android Nougat, which
is ridiculous.
Juan, first of all, Juan is still, is bitter, as we said last week about that too. But at least they got this update. The 2015 people got this update, right?
Moto X too. This is something that's been incredibly critically frustrating in the world of smartphones right now, are these kinds of stories. Like, you go out of your way to support a company like Motorola. They've been making promises about how they're going to support their products. It's a phone called the Pure Edition.
It's gonna be fast, man. all
should
those
be
up.
some expectation of support, but increasingly it just seems that once you reach a certain critical mass and once a company has your money, any expectation of good support from that should be kept wildly in check. Sitting next to Galaxy S8 and my Galaxy Note 8, and I just finished a comparison. We're gonna put that up this evening on the Mate 10 versus the Note 8, and like using the Mate 10 and using Oreo out of the box, or picking up my Sony Xperia XZ1 Compact and using Oreo out of the box and knowing, man, I don't even know how many months it's going to take before my Galaxy phones start getting some of these features. And those Galaxy phones are so much more expensive. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, that should not be how this industry works, where you're spending $800-900 on a phone and you can count on the company to be one of the last to properly update and support their products. That's not good. I'm mad.
Yeah, there's reason to be mad, especially as Google has pushed its official support window out to 3 years instead of 2. Though I'm not, I never really got a freaking idea of what it was. Like, was it typical security updates for 3 and OS for 2, or so I'm trying to look that up right now. But in terms of the future, Sahaj Sani, PN Weekly, what do you think about the future of Motorola flagships? What changes should they make? Well, for one, getting there, and number 2, is the experiment still alive? Is modularity still cool?
Yeah.
Just that.
But we know they're still investing into it. What I have a concern with is, how much longer are we going to run on the current implementation of Moto Mods? Because when that industry shifts, because there is an argument to be made for how much more expensive accessories are when you turn them into a Moto Mod. Like a battery pack that slaps onto the back of your phone is a convenience conversation, and you pay more for that convenience. And I think a number of consumers out there might appreciate knowing, I bought a phone and these accessories are built specifically to work in the best way possible with my phone. And so that's kind of what you're paying for. However, you now also have an ecosystem of products which might be end of lifed in one generation of phone, because we don't know how that Moto Mod compatibility is going to work over the next 2 years. And I think we have an expectation that we'll probably get about 3 solid generations of phones that support Moto Mods, but that means if you buy in on year 3, you only get the 1 year. So it's just a sticky place to be. The other point is, so many other companies are facing issues like this. Branding, marketing, naming. And I really think that one of Moto's biggest mistakes this year, which I produced a video on this for my vlog series, was just misunderstanding what consumers were looking for in their products. So like the Moto Z Force was the big fat phone with the bigger battery, but the Moto Z2 Force is really a follow-up to the Moto Z. And so that confused reviewers enough, and it confused consumers enough that it felt like you were getting a downgrade if you got a Moto Z2 Force from where we were with the Moto Z. Those kinds of missteps are obnoxious. Like, they should be small things, but that can actually have an impact on a company that's still struggling to increase their mind share on flagship phones. I don't think they have any problems on their mid-ranger and their entry-level stuff. It's this flagship discussion that they keep just making these small little stumbles in how they talk to their customers.
You don't make enough deal about how much work they put into getting these relationships going again with carriers, because the Moto Z2 Force was the first with even US Cellular, in addition to the other 4 carriers picking it up. And also all the mid-rangers, as you've said, working on all the carriers as well. So, I mean, it's not fair to the good work that they do. It's little things like those Z2 Force instead of the Z2. Just those. I don't know who to really blame here, whether it's the Lenovo side or the Motorola, not just in a sense of hard decisions made at this branch or that branch, but just as personality speaking, because you have these ways of integrating business into each and every little division of the company, but still,
but if the Moto Mod experiment ends, or if the Moto Mod experiment changes significantly, next year or the year after, that's going to be bad. So this is exactly one of those situations where I think Motorola really needs to get out ahead of the conversation on what future compatibility, on what these life cycles are going to look like, if there's an upgrade path, because the phones themselves, like, I think Motorola nails what they set out to do. I haven't had any major issues with their products, when judged against the claims that they're making as the manufacturer. I think Motorola's phones have been on point, but I have a little unease about some of the recommendations when, what you pay for in a Motorola flagship right now is buying into a modular ecosystem. So your phone, there's an idea that your phone is in a way incomplete, and you're going to be adding things to it to make it the best phone for you or the best experience for you. And I want to recommend that because I think there is merit to that argument, but I don't want to recommend that 1 year and then find that the very next year, all of that goes right out the window.
Well, that's the risk you take as a consumer. You shouldn't have to take it, but companies do as they will to ensure that they continue to survive and pass along, benefits to their shareholders. Just to clarify, Pixel 2 generation is getting OS updates for 3 years, not 2 now. So, hooray for that! Finally.
And again, there is that thing. Like, I want more companies to come out and explicitly make a commitment to their customers. Hundreds of dollars.
They hit this one pretty deeply in the tech specs.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, if I'm going to spend $900 on a Galaxy Note 8, I think a part of what I'm paying for, I should be able to ask Samsung, what is the time frame on security updates? How many operating system updates will I get? And how long will you properly support this product for bug fixes and security patches? And I should be able to hold you to that in some meaningful fashion. These things are now too important to everybody's daily lives to just kind of, whatever, you're just buy a new one. Like, that's not really acceptable. That can't be allowed to stand.
Too important to our daily lives, huh? I wonder what powers those things that make up our daily lives, and batteries. And it seems like after all this time, about 2 decades worth, I think, of lithium-ion technology we've been dealing with, now's the time, finally, for graphene. We've been playing with it for, as I've said, decades and decades, and we've found that it has a great potential for power, but it's too fragile. So carbon, it's straight up carbon, and it's also the same carbon basically as pencil graphite. It's just in a different form. Instead of crystals, you have a single layer of atoms, and they're arranged in hexagonal shapes, and those are pretty tough to keep in shape, especially when you add heat, which like all these volatile situations. So now what Samsung is doing is they're shaping them into little balls of silica, like actual, like the little packets that you have in your crisps that you shouldn't eat, by the way.
No, don't. That's bad.
And we're getting all the typical mumbo jumbo of, it's going to charge 5 times faster, and we're going to have all these things that's going to be in solar panels and everything else. And more importantly, it should be able to operate at up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit without deteriorating. So, great. And it's not, it's stuff that we've been able to talk about before. What now is the question, because now they're dealing with the patents. Now they're trying to actually commercialize the technology, or I don't know what stage they're trying to do that, because this is still R&D in terms of making it viable for commercial use. We're not sure where that's happening, but They have they have a monopoly on this. They're the largest patent holder of this kind of thing, technologies, and
Mhm.
they're just. It'll be weird to see Samsung batteries or like just all these um, like Samsung painted little cells going around into everything. So I'm wondering how licensing will work out, especially when.
Well, and this I think will be one of those situations where the switch that flips on this. I don't think this is going to be a fast transition in the market. I think whoever kind of gets there first, like if Samsung's solution here is really only a couple years away in terms of commercialization, we've seen this patent move is because there's a process that they can apply more directly and actually start moving towards a commercial product. That's probably because of an investment that likely only Samsung could have invested in. Like it'll be probably a 5-year window post Samsung's first commercial application before another company can replicate the manufacturing process at a scale that it makes it profitable. And it will, mean Samsung batteries will be a de facto monopoly for 5 years, something like that. I'm kind of just thinking in very general timeframes, but that number seems to make sense in my brain that if they can get ahead of this and they can be first, then they will own and occupy a certain position in the market for a significant period of time.
Even with FRAN terms, fair and reasonable pricing terms.
Well, because it's not even going to be, like you can set a fair price for licensing this process. Who will have invested in the manufacturing capabilities to take that license and make a competitive consumer product? It's still going to take time before another company can approach. I mean, look at OLED manufacturing. Only two companies manufacture a vast majority of OLED panels. I'm sure another player could license this tech from Samsung or from LG and start looking at what they could do to set up their own manufacturing lines. That's a years long process before anyone would be able to manufacture a commercial competitor, even with fair and reasonable licensing on that panel tech. And I think the same thing will happen with batteries. It'll probably end up whittling down the number of players in the market who actually fulfill this tech. And it's already not a huge market to begin with.
Yeah.
But there's also, it's one of those things like I'm just more excited for the prospect of seeing some of these improvements in place. My fear is we're going to get this. Well, you can hold 45% more capacity, so we can make your battery 45% smaller. We'll have batteries like the same runtime, but they use up less space on the inside of the phone.
Get ready for the 3.5 millimeter phone.
Yeah, I totally believe that'll be one of the first. It won't lead to.
Oh no! What? Like it'll be like a 2 millimeter device, and then we'll see one of Microsoft's patents for like a expandable membrane that can fit in the tip ring sleeve and plug it in.
And then Motorola will make it, a Moto Mod, and you can slap it on the back of your 1 millimeter thick Motorola.
It's going to be great. But I mean, if we can get graphene from just, I don't know, scrubbing a pencil on Scotch tape, which has been a researched method of getting graphene. You've joked about this before, but it's actually true. And silica, I mean, it's cheap as anything out there. It's sand. Then I don't know how much the machines and the computers will cost beyond that. So
that's true. I mean, maybe in a part of licensing that technology, it comes with a greater understanding of the manufacturing and yield, and maybe that can be replicated and iterated on more efficiently. It's just so few companies are looking to take on any kind of risk right now. No one's really looking to be a market disruptor, and this is one of those areas that isn't very visibly sexy. And by contrast, if there's a problem with a battery, there's every opportunity for a ton of negative press. I don't know. I'm super conservative on that, while I'm super excited about the potential for graphene batteries. So I hope I'm wrong there. I hope more players are actually able to make use of licensing this tech and can do something exciting with it. But I want to get onto this last story here. Johnny Ive kind of being a jerk.
Yeah, a jerk to not only himself but millions of people out there,
like Apple consumers and Apple fans. This is like my phrase for the podcast. Not a good look. Not a good look, Johnny Ive. Come on, man.
All right. Hold on. Give me a second here because I want to get into the mood. I have the iPhone 7 design video that Apple did for its keynote. I'm going to try and see if I can compare things. It's buffering, but it's not really doing anything. Oh, there we go. So, crescendo of orchestral greatness with a little bit of a tingling xylophone. We have created a product that is the most deliberate evolution of our founding design. An aluminum body, a form sheet of glass, singular shape. And it goes on and on for 2.5 minutes. Here's the passage that I want you to take away from the Smithsonian article. Ive places his space gray iPhone X on the table next to my iPhone 7 Plus, whose white bezel frames its rectangle of glass display. I'll say that again because I want to get this right. Whose white bezel frames glass display. Mine is only a year old, but it looks clunky in comparison. Ive picks up my iPhone and gives it a pointed appraisal of his own earlier handiwork. Quote, "It now seems to me a rather disconnected component housed in an enclosure."
You jerk face.
Yikes.
This makes me bristling angry again in Apple trying to move the needle on their products. Interactions like this make me feel that so many of these decisions really have been the cynical corporate monetization decisions that Apple is regularly accused of making. That like, it's not that Apple is trying to convince general consumers to pick up their products and trying to really convert Android users on a fair and level playing field. That a significant product strategy of theirs is just to make you feel bad about the product you currently own, to try and convince you to spend more money on the product that they're currently releasing. And that next year they're going to do the same thing again. Like, oh, iPhone 10, who could ever use a phone with that awkward unibrow cut out on the screen? You really want to get the iPhone 11 where that's even more seamlessly hidden into the top bezel frame of the phone. Obviously, who could use such an improperly designed product? It feels to me it would be a disconnected component housed in a way that would distract me from my display, that Face ID unibrow bar. That's terrible. And you're like, and we're probably gonna see that. I mean, it's just so galling to see a phone discussed that way from the person who actually designed the product.
So
it's
I want to give a little
on head stupid.
I want to give a little empathy towards his frame of mind here, because he grew up designing little pieces of work, and like most designers do, they'll toy cars and spaceships and whatnot, and I get it. For him, I feel like he's more attached to the act of designing as opposed to what he designs, which for him is just, that's the catharsis he puts down on when the paper, and when you're your own worst critic, especially with as time goes on, you get 20/20 hindsight, and when you're looking forward to the next product, to that iPhone 10, and you just don't see how it actually feels and actually works out just quite yet. It doesn't. I mean, that's the best thing that you could put out in 2016, and you just have to go with it. And I guess I'm not going to.
This is also
I'm not going to completely take away.
From the corporate perspective, the iPhone 7 was the phone that broke their TikTok strategy. So again, this is also like a really unfair commentary from Ive on on the iPhone 7, or he's basically just broadcasting, yeah, it was a compromised product. Like, we put out something that we knew wasn't the best that we could do, is essentially what he's saying, because we went iPhone 6, iPhone 6S. Where was the new iPhone number phone? You gave us an iPhone 6 with slightly redesigned antenna bands. Like, that's on you. That, you know, if you're suddenly now remarking, we've been criticizing Apple bezels for a long time now, Apple forehead and chins on the this isn't new to the discussion, and then to act like, oh, just, you know, really looking back on it, just, oh, this seems so terrible. We were all saying there, you could make better use of the real estate on the front of your phone even before we went to 2:1 aspect ratio displays. And it makes it even more laughable that the next quote that you listed in the article, and we have listed in the article on pocketnow.com. Who was going to say? Jobs loved the iPad, which he called an intimate device because it was immersive, like a good book, a window into whatever worlds you chose to explore. Quote, in so many ways, Ive says, we're trying to get the object out of the way, except for the fact that you built the Face ID directly into the screen, distracting you from the immersive qualities of having a larger display phone in a smaller form factor to use the app and experience the app. The phone is literally in your way. And again, once they figure out a design way around that, they're going to go back and say, oh, and the iPhone 10 that you spent $1,000 on, what ridiculous and terrible engineering. You need to buy the new one. It's only $1,200. This is it. I don't know that I could be more frustrated with the current state of Apple as a corporate entity right now. And this is just making me even more like twitchy and pissy about
between the narrative magic, and that was a word that Apple was not afraid to use this iPhone 10, and what it wants to do with objects and objectifying them. Like, to own up to something here. You have to own up to not only the actual design, but what it entails and the actual security risks that you involve in terms of Face ID, all this stuff. Like, when you tear it apart, it's magic for the masses and kind of complicated disillusionments when you get to not only the people that are interested in it, but also the regular average people that go to YouTube saying, hey, we found this latest way you can trick Face ID. So, man, it's
frustrating. It's really frustrating. It's frustrating because I think we also just as a tech community need to start having questions about things like corporate responsibility, about, you know, how companies fulfill their obligations to different countries and different states. And it's going to be tough conversations because we're fans of this equipment. We're fans of this tech. We like gadgets, but like, this is getting really ridiculous now. And it's all coming at a time where I think we're all waiting for what the next big new thing is going to be. And you're not going to impress me with $1,000 phone with a cutout screen and specs that are only marginally better than the phone that you can buy for like $300 less. It makes this less fun to talk about. And I want to see these companies do better. But we should probably wrap up with, we've got a number of tweets here that I want to kind of cycle through, some quick questions here and some good stuff. Hold on, I'm gonna scroll back because one of the first questions we got was before we even started the show.
Well, I mean, Renaud Laporte, I think, sums up his feelings with Johnny Ive by posting a GIF of a person in a panda costume smashing a keyboard in front of a shocked office worker. So there you go.
Yeah, kind of a little bit. I'm getting there, and I don't want to be there because I want to have more fun talking about this stuff. That's why I started talking about this stuff, is because it was super fun. So I want to have fun, guys. Don't make me
have fun.
Don't make me get twitchy. And it's not even an Android versus iOS thing, because we know the market will sort of follow wherever the money goes. And just like I'm pissed off with some of my favorite games for things like loot boxes and microtransactions, I'm getting real not happy with hardware manufacturers too. Okay, so this question comes from @PanzerZ. He asks, which phone is the best for the run and gun photographer who is 80% auto and wants a fast, consistent camera, but also wants the flexibility for more pro adjustments when needed. So, Jules, I mean, you've been rocking the Pixel. Would you recommend that for a photography solution?
Sure. I mean, for me, I've always had shaky hands, so I can ruin any smartphone photo that I might want to take. So, I mean, I'm not really the best judge for that. But in terms of getting the best auto efficient, and it turns on and it turns off when you need it. So, I would agree.
Yeah, I would probably still say, again, a lot of this comes down to what you shoot, what you like to shoot, how you like to shoot. But if you're saying a majority of your use is this sort of quick interaction out of the pocket, auto mode processing, then the Pixel is the best game in town. And then you would just want to supplement that with a third-party app for any situations where you might want more granular manual controls. And I don't have a ton of good recommendations on those. You can start with manual camera and just see if you like something like that. I use Cinema 4K for video on phones that aren't the LG V30. The only other one that I would maybe put out a maybe to, I don't think the V30 would be a good fit for what you're describing, just because there always seems to be just that split second extra loading time when you fire up the camera app when you compare a V30 against a Pixel. But I would maybe also consider a Huawei if you can get your hands on one to play with one. My wife has been nailing shots. Like right now, she's borrowing my P10 because the Pixel didn't work out for her, and she really likes her BlackBerry, but she wanted a better camera. So she was taking shots with the P10 that I've never seen her pull off with a Samsung or even with the Pixel. There's just something about the vibe of the P10 camera that clicked with her, and she really likes the quality of the photos that come out of Huawei's Leica designed camera. So that would be my dark horse, distant, lower on the list maybe option. But I think the Pixel is probably the best recommendation for the auto mode camera app.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I haven't had much of a chance to play with other phones. I'm not sure if I would recommend the OnePlus 5T or any OnePlus phone because they've always made just that little bit of on its photo community, the shot on OnePlus community. So just by having that, I think gives a little credit to what they want to do, what they aspire to. But
yeah.
In the end, the ultimate experience, I think, I would have to ask Jaime for that.
But I mean, like OnePlus is, I think you start looking at some of those players. OnePlus is a great example of the camera's fine. It's a good camera. When we're talking about getting into like literally the bestest of the bestest, you are also having a conversation about diminishing returns. I can pull off great shots with a OnePlus 3. Like we're good. We've gotten to a point where even a bad camera this year is still in much better shape than where we were even 2 years ago. And kind of following on that, we got another question here. This is from Daniel Mladenoff, hashtag PN Weekly. Here's an odd question. Probably not. I've gotten this question a number of times. If you had to go out and take pictures and video, would you choose an S8 or a U11 and why?
Having held neither, I've held the S8 a little bit more than I've never held the U11. I would go for the S8 just because of its form factor. That it's thinner and it's better to hold, I would presume, but I don't know in terms of the actual interface that we have to deal with. I've always preferred HTCs over Samsungs, but that's just me.
What's really silly is like the more I've played with all of these phones, if it were a fight between HTC and Samsung, I would probably say the S7.
Really?
The S8 is like, it's fine. It's a fine phone. I don't like how they sort of reorganized parts of the camera app to focus on things like stickers or Bixby Vision.
No, you gotta have those stickers. You gotta create your story, and you have to
And like, I
geotag
really, getting to the end of
hashtag.
2017 and not pulling my punches anymore, I really think Samsung's camera peaked on the S7. That was a nearly perfect interface to focus on auto mode photography with the ability to switch over into really great manual options and controls. And adding gimmicky crap to the main interface that you interact with, I think was a bad play. But
Dude,
between
you
the two,
gotta
I'd
broadcast
probably.
live to YouTube. You gotta broadcast live.
I mean, I probably should. But no, between the two, I'd probably also side with an S8. I think it's a tough look if you don't love Samsung's sharpening and application of additional saturation for their photos. But the overall mechanic, the dual pixel focusing, even though the U11 is a snappy performer too, Samsung's is really well refined at this point. And I just remember having an easier time using the S8 to get the shots that I wanted than the U11. Not that the U11 was bad. It's not a poor performer. It's a very good performer, but I am probably a bit more familiar with, and I like the S8 experience a little bit better. But we're talking, very minimal differences between the two and how much I like them.
Well, I mean, it's that old rivalry that we've always had going on with HTC being always the second fiddle. We never really even considered LG to be that second place. It's just HTC and Samsung, and well, those fortunes have definitely turned in a hurry.
Well, and in those questions, I mean, like there's a reason why I'm not trying to push the V30 on people. It's my favorite phone of the year. I will happily tell you it's my personal. This is my daily driver phone. This is a phone that was made for me. But I'm also not going out of my way to try and convince other people that they should pick one up. I want them to know that if there are certain things that might appeal to them about using a V30, then there literally is no other phone that works like the V30. But I don't know how many people really care about those options. This is coming from Kyle Ruggles. In reply to Andrew Wallace, he asks, PN Weekly, why does OnePlus release a phone with last year's OS only then to promise 2 years worth of upgrades? Oreo in the next year, and then P the year following. And then he does a little tongue sticking out emoticon. And I think that's exactly why. It's also, if you released a phone this year, so if you release a phone with Oreo out of the box, you are obligated to support Google's Project Treble. If you release a phone anytime in the future with Android 7 and then you quickly upgrade to Android 8, you are not obligated to support Project Treble. And I really think that's the big decision that these companies are making, is whether or not they want to get on board Google's future for how their products should be supported and updated. So I think that's probably the critical deciding factor for a lot of manufacturers. This will be a non-issue once Android P is out. But for right now, if you want that, Google is making harder and harder demands of their manufacturing partners. You have to support this. You have to use this for power management. You can't have this running in the background. And it seems like Android 7 is kind of the last Android operating system that you can slap on a phone right now that's still technically current in the world of smartphones, but then gives the manufacturer more leeway to customize or to run stuff in the background.
It's the last bastion of slow updates.
And then let's wrap up with this last one, because I'm not super positive on this trend. This is from Ryan Landis. PN Weekly, when are we going to get those flexible screens Samsung was showing years ago, the flip smartphone in the future? I just don't think folding out screens are that big a deal. So I don't know when they're going to show up.
I wouldn't be surprised if CES were the showcase this time around. So
you think so? You think we'll see? Now, do you think we'll see an actual consumer-facing product, or you think we're just going to see another like prototype?
I have to think it's the Galaxy S. We've seen documentation saying that it's we can support it now, but it still doesn't exist technically. So
here's my prediction. Here's my prediction. You think we'll see a folding screen for the next Galaxy S. That's your prediction?
No, it's not Galaxy S device. It's just a Galaxy X. That's the thing that they've been
I
trying
thought
to
you
do.
said S. So I thought you were saying, you know, like next year CES there was going to be. Okay. So my prediction is Galaxy S9, fingerprint sensor under the display, not on the back, and they'll remove the headphone jack and then try and convince you to get Gear Icon X buds. Then around the Note timeframe, we'll have a separate Note 9 and some kind of new, like you were saying, the Galaxy X, the Galaxy Flip, the Galaxy Fold, something like that, launch as a companion device for that. So you'll have a Galaxy S9, Galaxy S9 Plus at the beginning of the year, Galaxy Note, and Galaxy X at the second half of the year. I'm imagining a 4-product launch, a 4-phone launch at the flagship tier for Samsung next year. That's my prediction.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to have an early year anyways, because the S9 and G7 are supposedly at least getting previewed in January. I still believe that the S9 will get a March official launch, but it's going to be amazing to see that CES is going to have like a first preview of what's to come. It's going to be exciting for my first CES.
Yeah, you're gonna be joining us out there. I'm gonna be double teaming. That sounds wrong. I don't want to use that phrase. I'm gonna be double dipping CES for both Pocketnow and Newegg. So this will be my first CES covering like gaming hardware in years. So I'm stoked because like there's some really cool chipset stuff that I want to check out, and graphics card work that I really want to see. And I'm taking notes on all of this because I've got to rebuild my workstation soon. And like, oh, well, I want to get this water block kit. No, I want to get RGB everything. So I'm pretty stoked about that too. But we should probably wrap this up, Jules. It was a good show, man. I know it was news heavy, and I appreciate all the people out there that were dropping us comments and joining the conversation. We got some great questions, and we love it when you guys join the discussion. Let me get my notes back up here. So, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where Jules is at Point Jules. Give him a follow. And I'm humbly at Some Gadget Guy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. For Spanish speakers, definitely check out es.pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere. Now, shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and by dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever podcast reviews can be left, because ultimately there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness, so make sure you tune back in.